Welcome to the research labs of Better. Today we're taking a look at two of our test subjects. Martin has asked Julie on a first date. Let's take a look.
Hey, I am so excited to see this movie. I've heard so much about it.
I love you.
Okay.
Too soon. Let's see what it looks like with Better.
Hey, I am so excited to see this movie. I've heard so much about it.
Me too.
When life hands you choices, choose Better.
So, a man on a white horse enters a crowded market. As the hooves clomp loudly over the gravel, dust floats up, spiraling past the saddle into his nostrils. On either side of him, the vendors are selling fruit, souvenirs, and silk. He continues forward, and the crowd parts. He goes on and on and on until this white horse arrives at the feet of Jesus, at which point he pulls on the reins. He dismounts the horse. He reaches up and pulls back the hood on his finely sewn robe, and then he drops to his knees. He reaches out, grabs Jesus' tunic, and he says, "Jesus, I've been looking everywhere for you." And Jesus looks down at the man on his knees. He extends his hand, takes him by the shoulder, and with nothing but compassion swirling in his eyes, Jesus says, "It's funny because I've been looking for you too. What can I do for you?" And the man says, "Jesus, I just got to know one thing. There's all these kinds of questions I could ask. Truth be told, my head is a library of question marks that will probably never be solved. But there's one question above all that I need answered." And Jesus, with his hand still on the man's shoulder, says, "You can ask me any question that your mind can possibly construct. What is it?" And the man on his knees says, "Jesus, here's what I want to know. What I want to know is, how do I experience the fullest life possible?" I feel like I've been living for the last few decades and my life's been fine, like my life's been good, but I know there's more out there. I know there's more depth. I know there's more meaning. I know there's more love. I know there's more purpose, and I want it all. So how do I get it? And Jesus looks at him, he says, "Do you really want me to answer this for you?" And the man says, "Absolutely I do." And Jesus says, "Okay, well, you've heard of the 10 Commandments, right?" And the man, he gets really excited at this point. He says, "Jesus, I've heard of the 10 Commandments, and not only have I heard of them, I've done all of them since I'm a little kid. Honor your father and mother, don't commit murder, don't steal, don't covet, all that stuff, I've done it. So is that what it's all about? Is that like the secret to life? Is that how I get the fullest life possible?" And Jesus furrows his brow, squeezes his shoulder a little bit tighter, and he says, "Well, not exactly. If you really want full life, here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand up. I want you to climb back on your beautiful white horse, and I want you to ride all the way back to the mansion in the hills that I know you own. And once you get there, I want you to go inside, and I want you to sell off every single possession that you have." And so the man kind of adjusts himself in the gravel, and he says, "Okay, well then will I have the fullest life possible?" And Jesus looks at him and says, "I actually wasn't done yet. See, once you sell off all your possessions," and I mean every possession, like your bed and your dining room table and all of your clothing and all of your silverware and all of your fine art, even this horse, once you sell all that, then I want you to sell off all your property. All the acres that you own, full with your livestock and your chickens, your cattle, I want you to sell all that too. And then once you've done all that, then I even want you to sell the house in which you've been living for the last 2 decades. And the man reaches up and he wipes his forehead and he looks down at the ground. He says, "Well, Jesus, then will I experience full life?" And Jesus says, "I still wasn't done." See, once you've sold off all your possessions, and once you've sold off all your land, and once you've even sold off your house, then I want you to actually go through this entire city, and I want you to sever every single business relationship that you have. All the people that you've been making all this money with, I want you to tell them that you're done. You're going to close up every single shop that you've opened, every single enterprise that you've started. You're going to shutter them all. And then once you do that, and you get all the money back from it, and you have all the money from your possessions and your land and your house and your horse and your cattle, you're going to take all that money, and I want you to give it all away so that then you can just come and be with me. You can go everywhere I go. You can walk everywhere I walk. There will be absolutely nothing between us. It'll be you and me every single day with no possessions cluttering the love between us. And I promise you, if you do that and come with me, then you will experience the fullest life possible. What do you think? And so the man is on his knees and the market is still kind of loud around him. And in that moment, he closes his eyes. And in his imagination, he pictures a pair of scales. And he sets life with Jesus on one side. And initially, the scale is heavily weighted toward the side of Jesus. But then slowly, little by little, in his mind, he starts putting on all the things that Jesus has just asked him to let go of. So he puts on his clothing. And the scale tips a little bit. And then he puts on his bed, and he puts on his comfort, and he puts on all the fine meals that he gets to eat every single day whenever he wants. And the scale tips more and more, and then he puts on his property and his servants and his horse and his stables, and he puts on his house, and he puts on his reputation and his business and his money and his power. And before he knows it, the scale is totally tipped away from Jesus towards all the things that he owns. And even before this man opens his eyes, he knows what he's going to do. Jesus looks at him one more time. He says, hey, if you come with me, you're going to have full life. What do you think? And the man looks up at Jesus and he says, Jesus, I can't do that. You're just asking too much. And Jesus, with nothing but compassion swirling in his eyes, the same strength of compassion that he had when the man first arrives, he looks at the guy on the ground and he says, I totally understand. It's your choice. And so the man stands up, climbs back on his horse. He rides out of the market. In this story, which is actually found in Mark chapter 10, once this story ends, we never hear about this guy again. He's gone. See, this guy was willing to give Jesus a lot. He was willing to participate with Jesus in a lot of what Jesus wanted him to participate in. He was willing to relinquish most of his life. The problem was Jesus wasn't asking for most of his life or a lot of his life or the majority of his life. Jesus was asking for all of his life. And I sit there and I go, if I was on the ground, if I was the guy in the robe with the horse in the market on my knees with Jesus' hand on my shoulder, what would I have done? And I know the answer, and maybe for a lot of you, you do too. I would have done the exact same thing he did. I would have looked at Jesus and said, you're just asking way too much. And I would have turned and I would have ridden away. And as I rode away, I would have been thinking, what a ridiculous request he just made of me. Like he would have to be crazy to ask me to give up everything for him. I mean, he's either crazy or over the top, or maybe he's just unfair. And you know what? Maybe he is, because this request that Jesus made of the rich young ruler some 2,000 years ago, he's making of all of us now. He doesn't want part of me or part of you. He wants all of me and all of you. And most nights when I go to sleep, I think, God, maybe you're just unfair. And like I said, maybe he is. But then again, maybe he's not. So my 10-year wedding anniversary is in 28 days, 4 weeks from today. I'm very excited. Kristen and I have been married for 10 years, right? It's like an adult marriage now or something. And one thing that I've grown to love in part through my relationship with Kristen, I've always been a movie fan, okay? Science fiction, adventure, drama, indie, documentary, whatever. I kind of love all films, but Kristen has definitely stoked my affections for another genre called the romantic comedy, okay? The rom-com, I believe it's called. And so I can get into a good romantic comedy from time to time. The problem with romantic comedies is it's essentially the same plot being played out over the same 90 minutes, just people wearing different clothes. So it goes something like this. Guy from the wrong part of town. He's a mechanic. He slides out from under the car and he's in his greasy jumpsuit. He wipes his face one time. He has a black eye. Clearly he has a history of violence. We don't know what that's about yet. But then this girl, she brings her beautiful Rolls Royce, maybe a Porsche, maybe a Cadillac, into the shop one day. It's got a flat tire. What are we going to do? She comes in. She's not used to being around such grease. She gets a little bit on her high heel. Oh my gosh, that's okay. I'll get it for you. And he wipes it off. They look up at each other, look down at each other. Oh my gosh, there's this intense electricity. Neither of them have ever experienced this before. And now suddenly they're running down streets and there's puppies and there's chocolate and they're out on boat rides. And they fall in love. We don't understand. We're so different, but I love you. And so we fall in love, and everything's great for like the next 50 minutes, right? And now we arrive at like the 1 hour and 10-minute mark of this movie. There's 20 minutes left, and suddenly, for the first time, there's a crisis. Something's gone wrong for the first time. The sun's not shining. Clouds come overhead. Begins raining. Ryan Gosling's beard is soaked. They look in each other's eyes. Oh my gosh. And then they have this major conflict, right? And now, like, the storyteller, the director, and the actors, they're all wanting us to think that there's a chance that this isn't going to work out. Even though we know it is, because on the box it said rom-com, not make you sad and depressed film. So we know they're going to end up together, but still we get sucked in. And so they fight. There's like a 3-minute gap where they're no longer together. She has a conversation with a mom who said, you know what? 40 years ago, I should have married a different man. And then she goes back, it is you. I don't care if you're greasy. And so they have this conversation under this strange grove of trees. Even though they live in the city, there's a grove of trees. And they stand in this grove of trees, and they look at each other, and the conversation goes something like this. The guy looks at the girl, and he says, listen to me. You drive me absolutely crazy. Every time I'm around you, you're neurotic. You pick at everything. I don't understand 90% of the choices that you make. You're a mystery wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a dress that is way too expensive, and I will never be able to buy you another one. Okay, I don't understand anything you do, but here's the thing. In spite of all that, here's the thing. I cannot imagine my life without you. And so here's my heart to you. From right now, from this point on, I want every single part of you, the good and the bad, the parts I love and can't stand, the places where you have cared for me and the places that you have hurt me, the darkest corners of your life that nobody wants to step inside. I want those parts too, now, forever. What do you think? And in that moment, typically when I'm sitting there watching, I know it's cheesy and I know it's not really realistic. And yet, there's something in that moment when one of these people is saying to the other, I want all of you. There's still something in me that goes, that's love. I know it's cheesy presentation, but that's love. And what's so interesting to me is that when I see it in a romantic comedy, one person telling another, I want all of you, I recognize it as love, but when Jesus says it to me, I just think he's being unfair. Is it possible? Is it possible that when Jesus looks into the face of the rich young ruler, and when he looks into my face and he looks into your face and he says, listen, I want every single part of you, now and forever, every single day. Is it possible that these are not the words of an unfair, cold-hearted, crazy tyrant, but the words of a loving king, of a God who loves me and you too much to only get part of us in return? If my wife said, Josh, I will give you part of you for the rest of my life, it would devastate me. It would devastate me, and I know it would not be loving to tell her, Kristen, I will give you part of me, most of me, for most of the rest of our lives. I know that's not love. Is it possible that when Jesus says these words to the rich young ruler, and to me, these are the words of a God who understands that if we want to come fully alive, then we have to engage him fully. If we want every single corner of who we are to bloom and flourish, then we have to participate with him in every single corner of who we are. Is it possible these words are coming from a God who knows that sometimes it's the smallest parts of our lives that oftentimes get the strongest hold on us? Jesus looks at him and he says, I want all of you. And the rich young ruler looks back and he says, Jesus, I'll give you most of me. I'll give you a lot of me. I'll give you part of me. I'll give you 90% of me. But there is this 10% of my life that I'm going to hold back for myself. And so my first question for you tonight is, what's your 10%? What's that area of your life, that corner, that thing, that relationship, that area of your soul or your psyche where you're saying, God, I would rather do this part of it my way, in my time, and without you? Maybe for some of us, like that 10%, and 10% is just a number. I mean, the truth is, if we were to say, Josh, what's your 10%? I would have to probably say, mine's more like, what's my 80%? It's like I engage God maybe in 20% of my life, and then I do 80% without him. But for some of us, that percentage that we're holding back, it's like it's something as basic as love. And we say, yep, God, I know you want me to love everybody, regardless of what they think, regardless of how they act, regardless of their background, behavior, ethnicity, place, regardless. You want me to love everybody. And we say, yep, I'm totally in on that. Oh, wait, you want me to love my dad too? I can't do that. Because I know what my dad has done to me, and you know what my dad has done to me, and my dad knows what he's done to me. I cannot love him. And so we take that part and we go, God, I'm going to love most people, but not all. Maybe for some of us that area is in something like bitterness or resentment. And we say, yep, God, I know you want me to forgive. I know you want me to forgive. And so the vast majority of the time, I'm going to forgive people who wound me. But there have been these couple moments in my life where it's just too hard, and I'm not going to try to let go, and it's just way easier to resent somebody than forgive. Maybe for some of us, that percentage we hold back, and I actually had a conversation about this with somebody just like 45 minutes ago. You have a talent, you have a gift. I know almost none of you in this room, but I don't have to know you personally to know that there is so much talent and passion just churning in this room. And I'll bet for a lot of us, we say, God, I want to partner with you. I want to collaborate with you in amazing things. Oh, wait, you want me to use that gift? Like publicly, like in front of other people? Like that's terrifying. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work out? What if people laugh? What if they don't like it? And so we hold that part back. What is your 10%? Would you be willing, unlike me most days, and unlike the rich young ruler, rather than getting on your horse and riding away, to say, okay, God, I'm going to engage you there too? Can I tell you another story? Good, thank you. I have two sisters. I have an older sister who's 2.5 years older than me. I have a younger sister who's 2.5 years younger than me, and so I'm the middle boy. And a few years ago, I guess it was more than that now. This was back in 2008. My older sister called me. She was living in Chicago at the time, and I was living in Austin, Texas with Kristen and our little dog, Ditka. And my older sister called me and she said, Josh, I know what I want to do with my life. And so, I'm sitting there listening to her on the phone, and immediately I have these like flashbacks to our childhood. Because in our childhood, and true to this day, my older sister is just wildly talented, one of the most talented, creative people, one of the best communicators I've ever met. And she, since our childhood, had this dream of being on Broadway. And so, I grew up watching her, in theater productions, dancing, singing, just really kind of mind-boggling talent. And so when she called me 8 years ago, and she said, I know what I want to do. I immediately, into the phone, I say, oh my gosh, you're moving to New York. You're going to be on Broadway. You're going to be in Cats on opening night of Cats. I will be in the front row dressed as a cat celebrating your debut. And, I can imagine her horrified face on the other end of the phone. And she says, no, I'm not gonna be on Broadway. And I said, well, Corbett, that's my sister's name. I said, well, Corbett, what is it? And she said, well, my husband and I, we've been married for a lot of years now, and we decided we want to try to start a family. And so immediately I slip into this uncle skin that I didn't even know I had, and I just immediately get excited to have a nephew or a niece. And so very soon after that, my sister calls me again. She tells me, she said, Josh, I'm pregnant, and 9 months go by, because that's typically the way that it goes. Chris knows all about that. And 9 months go by, and she says, Josh, I'm going to labor, and would you please come and be here? At this time, both my mom and dad weren't around anymore. They had both passed away years earlier. And so I felt like when my sister was saying, Josh, will you please come to Chicago and be here with me? Not through any doing of her own, but I just felt this burden. I felt like I needed to be her brother. I felt like I needed to be her dad. I felt like I needed to be her mom. I felt like I needed to be every role in our family that nobody else could fill. And so I said, I will absolutely be there. And so Kristen and I, we catch this red-eye flight from Austin to Chicago. We fly, we land drunk on Red Bull. We arrive at the hospital. I go in, I buy the largest stuffed giraffe legal in the state of Illinois, and I go tearing through this maternity ward, and it's balloons and crying and plants and stuffed animals and candy and little top hats, and people are celebrating. And finally, I get to my sister's room. I open the door, and there, lying in that little cramped hospital bed, my older sister is holding this new little boy named Cyrus. And it was just this it was just like a perfect moment, Today is such a great example of how hard and how confusing and how difficult and tragic life can sometimes be. And I don't have any answers for any of that stuff. But I just know for me, one thing that makes me want to do is savor when life is so good. And I walked into that room and I saw my sister with Cyrus and her husband. I just went, man, life is so good. And for the next, hours, we just celebrated and we passed him around and we're laughing. And I'm already reading him books because I kind of have this crush on books. And so I'm already reading him books that he clearly doesn't understand yet. And a few hours go by and then the doctor comes in. And he walks in, and this nurse is kind of trailing behind him, and he's holding this clipboard tight across his chest. And he walks up and shakes my hand and everything, and he says, "Well, it's like I'm glad you're having such a great time with Cyrus." He says, "But I need to share with you some very, very difficult news." And immediately, like all that, like just kind of abundant joy, it felt like in a moment, it just like disintegrated. And immediately it's like replaced with anxiety and fear and the worst kind of anticipation. And so right as the doctor starts talking, my older sister's husband, he kind of curls up on this tiny bed beside her. And the doctor said, "Well, we're not going to know for about 48 hours. We have to run more tests. But we are fairly certain that your son Cyrus has one of two things. The first thing he may have is something called Down syndrome. And if he has Down syndrome, we can talk about that if that proves to be true. But I need to make you aware that there is a likelihood that your son Cyrus has something else. And that other thing is called Edwards syndrome." I had never heard of Edwards syndrome. I didn't know what it was, but to me it sounded like one of those things I wished I could disinvent. The doctor said, if your son has Edwards syndrome, then he will not, in all likelihood, live to be one. And in that moment, the nurse kind of comes around the bed, and the doctor keeps talking. He says, "We need to take Cyrus now, and we need to run some tests. But as soon as we know anything, we'll let you know." And so she takes Cyrus, and the doctor walks out, and she follows behind, this little boy that none of us ever wanted to let go. He was already, gone. And right when the door closed, I looked at my older sister, and she just, imploded into tears. And she was shaking, and her husband was holding her. And the next number of hours were filled with equal measure of tears that the previous hours were with laughter and joy. It's like you may have all these questions about life and God are spinning in my head, and I'm just trying to kind of cope with the confusion and the anxiety I have. I can't imagine what it was like for my sister. And so one of the things I did is I just walked up and down the hospital hallways. Just walked up and down. I'm drinking that terribly stale hospital coffee in those little white styrofoam cups. And, we made it through the first day. And right around maybe the 36-hour mark or so, as I was walking in the hallway, this little piece of poetry kind of fluttered across my mind. I enjoy poetry quite a bit. I feel like it understands me in a way that a lot of people don't. But this piece of poetry that came to my mind is actually found in the Old Testament. And it's Proverbs 3:5. And it goes like this. I'll try not to mess it up. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart." Not trust in the Lord with some of your heart. Not trust in the Lord with most of your heart. Not trust in the Lord when things are good. Not trust in the Lord when you like who you are. Not trust in the Lord when you get your way. Not trust in the Lord when your family is healthy. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. And lean not on your own understanding. Don't count on your interpretation of your life to see you through. And that just kept riding around in my mind. And while I would love to say, "Oh, I thought of this verse, and then it was all better. I just trusted God," that's not at all what happened. What actually happened is I thought of this little piece of poetry, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart." And in every single part of me, I knew I could not do that. Trusting God wasn't just hard for me when I was walking around that hospital. Trusting God has always been hard for me. As long as I can remember. When I was little, My mom used to come in and read me stories at night. I grew up largely in the early 80s and mid 80s, and so I had these Empire Strikes Back bed sheets, which were just amazing to the nines, you know. And my mom would come in and she would read me these like classic children's books, like, you know, Hats for Sale and The Giving Tree and Where the Wild Things Are and all stuff. It's just awesome. And my mom had this real knack for taking a story that seemed like it was about something over here, and then somehow weaving it in and tangling it back and making this braid, and then it became a conversation about God. She just had this knack for doing it. And right before my mom turned out the light and I fell asleep every night, she had this kind of saying, you know, like this axiom that she loved to deliver to me all the time. It was like a 2-point thing. She would always say to me, Josh, you can trust God. And then she would always say this other thing. She would always go, because God has a plan for your life. That's what she'd say. Josh, you can trust God. God has a plan for your life. She said it to me all the time. She gave me my first Bible in 1989. I was 10 years old, and in it she wrote, amongst other things, Josh, you can trust God. God has a plan for your life. And what I never had the heart to tell her, my mom died in 2007, what I never had the heart to tell her was that neither of those phrases ever brought me any comfort. This idea of God having a plan for my life never brought me any comfort, because my question was never, does God have a plan for my life? Does God have like a dream for my life? Does God have like an intended way, a kind of like full way for me to live? My question was never, does God have a plan for my life? My question, my honest question was always, is God's plan better than mine? Because in my plan, I don't fail. And in my plan, I don't struggle. And in my plan, when I look in the mirror, I like what I see instead of despising it. And in my plan, my family doesn't get sick. And in my plan, people like me. And in my plan, I can afford the things I want. And in my plan, I wake up and I have joy rather than guilt. And I have love rather than anger. That's my plan. And so my question was always, God, can I really trust that your plan is better than mine? Can I trust that what you want to do in me is better than what I could make of my life without you? Can I trust that forgiveness is better than bitterness? Can I trust that integrity is better than deceit? Can I trust that compassion and mercy is better than judgment? Can I trust that self-control is better than gossip? Can I trust that love is better than hate? Can I trust that even when you feel far away, you're not far away? Can I trust, God, that who I'm meant to be is far better than anything I could ever pretend to be? Can I trust that this garden of scars that covers my heart can somehow bloom into something meaningful for me and redemptive for the world around me? God, can I really, really trust you? Can I really trust you? Or if I let go and do it your way, am I just going to end up disappointed? Well, like I said, that has been one of many struggles that have lasted for me as long as I have had a beating heart. And that weekend with my sister in the hospital waiting on the news for Cyrus, it was no different. I thought, God, no, I can't trust you. I don't trust you. And so we waited and we waited and we waited. And right around the 48-hour mark, as promised, the doctor returned. And he came in with the same nurse and the same clipboard, and Cyrus was not with them. And, you know, right when he came in, my older sister's husband, he curled up on that tiny little bed again with her, and he held her, and we knew that whatever this doctor said was going to impact our lives so dramatically. I mean, we felt so helpless. And the doctor comes in and he says, well, we've got the results on your son Cyrus. And he said, Cyrus does not have Edwards syndrome. He said he's going to live. Now he does have Down syndrome. And so that's going to create some unique challenges for you as a family. But he will be, and he already is, an absolutely amazing, amazing little boy. And right when he said it, you know, I kind of like tried to absorb it. And I just looked over at Corbett. I looked at my sister. And in that moment, and in the months and years to follow, never have I ever seen her say, God, why didn't you give me the kid that I planned on getting? God, why didn't you give me the kid that didn't have this or had that or wasn't like this or was like that? I never in that moment or in the years to follow have seen my sister say, God, why couldn't you have given me what I dreamed up? Instead, she has let go of her plan and with both arms embraced God. She has embraced the kid she has been given rather than simply wishing for a different kid. And so as I watched her do that in that moment and in the months to follow, I'm just so inspired. And so I got in there. I was like, okay, I'm going to be the best uncle ever. And so I read Cyrus' books and I was like, Cyrus, Shakespeare, if you are 5 and have not read this, it's not okay. And so I read to him and we played and we had so much fun. And we just all absolutely fell in love with this little boy. And so about a year goes by, I'm back in Austin, and I get another phone call from my sister. And she says, Josh, I know what I want to do with my life. And I'm going, okay, got the kid out of the way. Now Broadway, you, cats, me, meow mix, celebrating. And she's like, no. And the weird water is real deep around your neck right now, okay? Be careful. She said, no, I'm not going to be on Broadway. And I said, well, what is it? What do you want to do? And she said, well, my husband and I, we've decided to expand our family. Now I get excited. And she said, we're going to have another boy, I think. More excited. She said, well, hold on. This time we're adopting. My head is exploding. And she said, we're adopting from Ukraine. That country sounds awesome. She says, his name is Vlad. I love him already. And then the last thing she told me in that quick little bullet point run, the last thing she told me was my favorite. She said, and Josh, Vlad also has Down syndrome. My man Brent is going to put a picture of my nephews up here on the screen for you. So on the left here is Cyrus. And on the right, with his hand held up, is Vlad, the Ukrainian bulldog. And every time I see these two little guys, and I get to see them often, I wish I could see them more, but every time I get to see them, I remember of how powerful it is when someone says, God, this isn't what I envisioned, this isn't what I pictured, this isn't what I would have chosen, but I'm going to choose to trust you. Trusting God, I don't totally understand it, but maybe the way I think of it is trusting God is not just saying, God, I trust you. Trusting God is the full engagement with Him in our lives. It's full and active participation with Him in the life that we have been given. And every time I see these little guys, I'm reminded of how powerful that can be. My sister would never describe her life as easy. She would never describe it as simple. It is often heartbreaking and hard. But if it is full life that I want and full life with you want, she would always describe her life, heart, and family as full. Where do you need to trust? Where in your life do you think you have a better way? Would you be willing to start to let go? Rather than just longing for a different life, to instead embrace with two arms the life you have been given and engage God fully in it. I'm going to tell you one more short little story, and then you don't have to deal with me anymore. So in John 15, Jesus is sitting at a short wooden table with his 12 disciples, and there's fruit, and there's bread, and there's water, and there's wine, and there's 2 candelabras, and atop the wicks there's this little flaming ballet happening amongst their faces, shadows on their eyes and on their chins. And as they laugh and talk, what the disciples don't know is that in a matter of hours, Jesus is going to be arrested and he's going to be killed. And so there's a conversation that he still wants to have with them before he leaves. And so he looks into these 12 faces, 24 eyes around the table, and he asks them basically the same question that the rich young ruler asked of him months earlier. He looks at them and he says, guys, do you really want to become who you're born to be? And they all look at him and they go, Yeah, we do. And he says, no, I'm serious. Like, do you really want to live fully? I don't mean like kind of, existing or like, ending your life one day and feeling like you were just a shadow as you walked across this world. I mean, do you really want to live fully? And they look at him and they go, yeah, Jesus, we want that. And so they lean on the table and he leans on the table and he says, well, then it's real simple. All you have to do is remain in me. Now, this is where my imagination gets a little bit away from me, so I apologize ahead of time. But I imagine that when Jesus says this, hey, if you want full life, you want to become you're born to be, just remain in me. I imagine Matthew sitting there across the table and going, and he kind of leans over to John, and he says, did he just say to remain in him? I'm pretty sure that's what he said. Do you have any idea what that's supposed to mean? I have no idea, bro. No idea. And so Jesus, he looks at these 12 guys. He sees the furrow and confusion on their faces, and he goes, okay, all right, my bad, guys. Okay, just forget that. Let me, maybe you're not like contemporary enough. Let me go old school with you. Let me King James it up for you. Okay, let me King James it up. If you really want to live, do you guys want that? And they all go, yeah. Jesus says, if you really want to live, then you abide in me. Matthew again. Matthew leans over. Did he just say to, bro, he's looking at us. He can't see us. He's God, you idiot. He can see everything. Trinity. Okay, he looked away. Did he just say to abide in him? Yeah. Did that clarify it at all? I'm more confused. I don't get it at all. Y'all, this is what Jesus says. He says if you want to live fully, if you want to become you're born to be, if you want to experience the fullest life possible, he says, abide in me, remain in me. And I have to think the disciples were going, what in the world are you talking about? And the only reason I think they were thinking that is because 2,000 years later, that's what I'm thinking. I know it's like really bad form to come all the way out here from New York City and like close this talk and tell you I don't know what this means, but the truth is, I have no idea what this means. The good news is, Google knows. I Googled this. It was quite fun. Remain, abide, Google. What does it mean? And here's what Google told me. Google told me that to remain, to abide, it means to take up residence, okay? To take up residence. So Jesus is actually saying if you really want to live fully, then you take up residence in me. And so now Matthew sits there and goes, okay, guys, let's huddle up. And they all get around the table and they go, okay, your residence. Let's just do like a word association. First thing that comes out of your mouth, Luke, go, your residence. And Luke stands there and he goes, well, first thing off the top of my head, when I think of my residence, I think the place that I wake up every morning. And they go, okay, that's good. And Matthew says, see, that's interesting because when I think of my residence, I think of like kind of where I lay my head every night. And then John goes, see, that's interesting because when I think of my residence, I think of the place that I want to go when life is good and I can celebrate and I have joy. And then another disciple says, see, that's interesting because when I think of my residence, I think of the place I can go and shut the door and I can just be broken and lonely and I don't have to pretend or hide. And another disciple says, see, my residence is the place that I want everyone I know to come into because I feel like it's such a representation of who I am. And another disciple says, my residence is the place that though sometimes I may leave for work or vacation, I always come back. And I wonder if in that moment, in this little room around those candles, these 12 individuals didn't start to understand what Jesus was saying. That Jesus is saying, if you really want to live, you make me where you wake up in the morning. And you make me where you rest your head every night. If you really want to live fully, then you make me the place you come when life is good and you want to celebrate and you have joy. And you make me the place you come when you are beaten down, discouraged, defeated, lost, lonely, hurting, you come to me then. I wonder if they didn't understand. Jesus was saying, if you really want to live fully, then you make me the place you want all of your friends and family to step into. You make me the place that though sometimes you may leave, you always come back. I wonder if they didn't understand in that moment that Jesus was maybe saying, if you really want to live fully, you make me your home. You make me your home. And then he leaves it on us to wrestle through what that means. What does that mean to you? Let me ask you this. Have you done that? Is Jesus your home? I want to be very clear about something. Jesus does not say, if you really want to live, go to church. He does not say that. He does not say, if you really want to live, read the Bible sometimes. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, if you really want to live, then have friends who have made me their home. He says, no. If you really want to live, you make me your home. Let me pray. God, thank you so much for this community of folks. Thank you so much, God, for the opportunity to be here. God, I am grateful that, I guess I both am grateful and bitter over the fact that you want all of me. But I am really grateful that you didn't give me only part of you. God, I pray that we would be people, Lord, who are okay being in process, okay being flawed, who never feel the need to mask the fact that we aren't. And God, simultaneously, I pray and I want to be the kind of person, Lord, who seeks to engage you in your loving and full way of life with every part of who I am, every relationship, every talent, every desire, every day, not just part of me, but all of me. In your name, amen. Thanks, y'all.